The Choices and Challenges Forum series was developed at Virginia Tech to explore the ethical and social dimensions of science and technology. The following presentation, taken from one of the forums in the Choices and Challenges series, is made possible by a grant from the Center for Excellence in Undergraduate Teaching. Additional support has been provided by Video Broadcast Services and the Center for Interdisciplinary Studies at Virginia Tech.
Each of us can really have an effect, whether at a local level, the most local being on our own self or our family, but oftentimes on a broader effect, a broader scope, the community or even the nation. And the changes seem to take forever, but there have been many people who've played very significant roles at the local or national level and proving that you really can have an effect. It's not hopeless out there, and I encourage people to get involved however they can. I'd like to tell a couple of stories first. One goes back to 1982. Back at that time, the Food and Drug Administration was proposing that a long-used food additive called sulfite be declared generally recognized as safe. This is a chemical that has been used as a preservative probably for several thousand years in wine. It's the stuff that prevents dried apricots from turning brown. It's used in certain raisins. It's used in a wide variety of foods. Well, just about the time FDA proposed that it be declared safe, I read a medical report showing that sulfites caused allergic reactions. We looked into it and discovered that there were at least half a dozen reports going back over the past 6 years or so documenting quite clearly that sulfites caused reactions, especially in asthmatics. So at the time FDA said this should be declared safe, we asked FDA to ban this chemical as a potential danger. That generated some publicity, but not really any action. But one of the journalists who saw this story was from 60 Minutes, and they did a major report on sulfites. And as they reported, the Food and Drug Administration had not reviewed the last 6 years of medical research, those years in which this new research was developed, and so they blithely proposed that it be declared safe. So 60 Minutes did a major report, and it didn't seem to have any effect on the Food and Drug Administration, but it elicited a tremendous number of letters and phone calls from people who believed that they had been harmed. And this 60 Minutes report was echoed in other media and actually rebroadcast twice, and we began to hear of deaths related to sulfites. First one, then two, then it seemed like every day in the mail we began hearing death reports from sulfites. We followed up on these reports, alerted the Food and Drug Administration, and it got to the point where about 15 to 20 deaths were clearly linked to sulfites. Still, FDA did nothing. Finally, several years had gone by. In 1985, a House Congressional Committee took an interest in this issue because we had gotten legislation introduced into Congress. Several members of Congress were interested. And one of the witnesses was were the parents of a dear 9-year-old girl who died shortly after eating some foods at a Mexican restaurant that used sulfites in guacamole and some other products to prevent discoloration. It was this hearing that forced the Food and Drug Administration at long last to move. And once FDA got behind it, then FDA cracked down on labeling, forced companies that were using sulfites without labeling to put sulfites on the label, stopped makers of most fresh fruits and vegetables from using sulfites, required the wine industry to declare sulfites on the label. And now there are still some fresh foods that have sulfites, but many fewer, and we've heard of relatively few reactions since then. The advocacy made a difference in this case. Around the time of that hearing, back in 1985, our organization began looking at junk foods, and we were looking at fast foods. those were foods everybody knew were junk foods, but people knew they were so junky that they never looked at the nutritional values. The case was so self-evident. Bonnie Liebman, a nutritionist in my office, decided to take a quick look and found that these foods were junkier than anybody ever believed. Foods like, at that time, Wendy's had a triple cheeseburger with 15 teaspoons of fat. I have here the amount of fat that's contained in a Big Mac, fries, and a shake. It's about 11 teaspoons of fat. Sounds great, doesn't it? Well, that's what you're eating when you're eating a Big Mac, fries, and a shake. A double beef Whopper with cheese at Burger King still contains that. And what we found was that there was tremendous secrecy in the industry. Most companies wouldn't divulge and didn't know, I think, the nutritional values of their products. McDonald's was one of the few companies that did know the nutritional values, and companies just weren't saying. We began publicizing some of the facts that we did know, such as the McDonald's and Burger King fried their foods in beef fat, not vegetable oil, the way people fry them at home. The McDonald's used ground-up chicken skin in the Chicken McNuggets. The yellow dye number 5 was used in a wide variety of foods. And also that some of these companies advertised deceptively. McDonald's said Chicken McNuggets were pure chicken. They didn't mention the beef fat in which the Chicken McNuggets were fried or the ground-up chicken skin. The New York State Attorney General went after McDonald's and forced McDonald's to change the advertisement, but more so to change their information policy and forced McDonald's to disclose nutrition and ingredient information to the American consumer. Since then, there have been a great deal more publicity. We've held press conferences getting scientists to criticize the frying of foods in beef fat. We've written books, got legislation introduced in Congress, and this cacophony of criticism and official and unofficial actions have forced the food industry, fast food industry, to make some changes. So a lot of the companies have stopped frying foods in beef fat. Hardee's, Arby's, a number of others. Now McDonald's and Burger King only fry their potatoes in beef fat. They've stopped frying their chicken and fish and pies in beef fat. And most companies now disclose the ingredients and the nutritional values, but they still should be on the label of the products. Maybe one of these years we'll get that.
I have a question. I have always heard that low-fat diets were implicated in decreasing the incidence of stroke and heart disease as well as most cancers. And if I'm not mistaken, I heard you say that low-fat diets are implicated in the increased incidence of stroke as well as some cancers. Could you explain this?
There have been several studies that have found this relationship of low serum cholesterol and low-fat diets, particularly in Japanese participants, with increased risk of stroke and certain types of cancer. And I think one of the problems is that in the scientific policy arena, people who are deciding that we should all be on low-fat diets have ignored these types of studies. And I think I would be much more comfortable with the dietary recommendations if we were told, yes, there may be a downside to this. I don't think we should ignore this. I don't think people are that naive that they can be presented with risks and benefits and come to their conclusions. I agree with most of the dietary recommendations of the Heart Association. I agree with a lot of Dr. Jacobson's dietary recommendations, but I don't think I agree with their certainty with which we will reduce incidence of various diseases.
Let me just add something, if I may, Doris. I think we're getting some weak need recommendations, weaker need than they need to be. For instance, to have a doctor from the American Heart Association reassure a heart disease patient that it's okay to eat Ben & Jerry's ice cream, I think is asinine and dangerous. And for one thing, Ben & Jerry's doesn't even have nutrition labeling. It's extremely high in fat. It's exactly the kind of food that he should not eat. And if that were my father, for instance, I would certainly advise him to cut down and to go through his diet and look at where he's getting his fat, where he's getting his sodium, and cut those out as much as he can. And that would be prudent, I think. And for each of us who doesn't have heart disease, I think it's important to know what I think is the best possible diet and move in that direction. And that means eating whole grains rather than the fluffy white bread. If you want red meat, eat roast beef instead of hamburgers. Something like a Burger King double beef Whopper with cheese is a death burger. Don't eat that stuff. And you know, is that prudent? Is that prudent? Come on,
Michael, I think it is prudent. I think because people are going to do that, and what you need to give people, the public, is sound advice regarding a total diet. The public is going to eat margarine. They are going to eat ice cream. They need to know that an ice cream contains X amount, and we have the ability to do it, to tell them that a certain serving size of ice cream will contain approximately this amount of fat. If you're going to do that, then you have to look at the rest of your daily diet and realize that you may have just taken up your 300 milligrams of cholesterol in that half a cup of ice cream.
Well,
That's
look,
it
my goal isn't 300 milligrams of cholesterol. There's no benefit from eating that greater amount of cholesterol. I want to cut down. I don't want to have that ice cream. I'm going to have a piece of fruit for dessert.
Do you have any data, though, that eating 200 milligrams of cholesterol for the average healthy American adult is appropriate?
It's a matter of odds. I think 200 is better than 300. I think that 100 is better than 200. There are many studies on vegetarians showing health benefits of very low cholesterol, low-fat diets. And if you want to look at the Japanese and stroke, don't blame it on the low-fat diet. Look at their extremely high sodium intake.
Those studies were done factoring out the relationship between sodium and the incidence. The studies that we're referring to, that David's referring to, that I'm referring to, looking at stroke incidence in the Japanese, factored everything out and then realized that the one factor that seemed to be significant was the cholesterol level. And so your sodium argument is incorrect. It clearly relates to fat intake, and it's fascinating data.
Well, I think we'll have to continue that particular argument another time. It seems that because I'm not familiar with those particular studies. Now, it seems, Dr. Klerfeld, that you're saying, be prudent, don't make any changes, especially in policies. What that means is that it's industry that's making the policies. We're at the mercy of McDonald's. We're at the mercy of General Foods, of Campbell. If they put in this much sodium, that's what we're going to get. Why not tell people the best? Is it better to have less sodium or more sodium? Less fat or more fat? Or you just throw up your hands?
But you can take that to the ultimate extreme, zero sodium, zero fat. And that is clearly impossible. There's natural sodium.
That's right.
Fat is essential in the diet.
We needn't worry about fat deficiencies. Is there anybody in America who has a fat deficiency?
There are young children who have been hospitalized with failure to thrive, being put on yuppie diets.
Yeah, there have been a few. There have been a few, I grant you. It's extremely difficult to get that kind of a diet.
Mike, you have to be very, very careful, though, here, though. And I think, first of all, we have the children. Clearly, these recommendations do not relate to young children under the age of 2.
That's right. I agree with that.
I think one has to understand that very clearly. Then let's go back to your analogy with the ice cream issue, because you're falling into the same trap that, unfortunately, the Food and Drug Administration did when we rolled out HeartGuide. They were saying that margarine shouldn't be in there because it's a bad food. There are not good and bad foods. There are good and bad diets. And what you've got to do for the American public, for the people that are listening to this conversation, is teach them how to eat good diets, so that no individual is going to eat a stick of margarine like a banana. But they need to know what a serving size is of the margarine and how much fat is in that serving size. Same thing holds for ice cream, a 3-ounce piece of steak. All of that can be done. The technology is there, and the public wants that information and deserves it. Then they'll make sound, healthy dietary choices.